Are you listening?
This is the Rob Scott Show.
Damn.
I mean, really, like, if we're not trying to change the world, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Welcome back. Here we are. Hold on, not welcome back. No. It's just welcome to the Rob Scott Show, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's do that. Listen, in today's episode, what we want to give you is a quick little tip that is going to help you have more self-control. This is something that's going to help you strengthen your important habits. It's going to give you the ability to set and accomplish your most important goals. You're going to get less anxiety because of this, better problem-solving skills. You can ultimately become the person who's proud of your achievements, build a better work ethic, become healthier physically, emotionally, mentally. I mean, all of these things, it really matters. And we're going to be talking about the difference between instant and delayed gratification, right? And the importance of being able to improve the muscle of delayed gratification primarily, but we're not going to throw instant gratification under the bus either. Does that make sense to you? Do you want to talk about that, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for listening to this episode. It's going to be a good one. Let's get into it.
I think it's going to be really good today. I feel like there's two crucial abilities that we as human beings want to be able to gain, right? And one is to do the things that we should do that we don't want to do, right? Those difficult things that we should do that we don't want to do. Eat right, work out, pay our taxes on time, like all those things that we resist doing but we should do that would make a big difference if we do them. We want that muscle. And then there's the not doing of the things that we shouldn't do that are actually really fun to do or difficult, eating sugar immediately, for some of us doing drugs or drinking too much or the things that are immediately pleasurable. And it really makes for like this 2x2 quadrant. If we want to think about it that way, you could imagine what you should do and what you shouldn't do against what you do and what you don't do. Right.
Right. Right. Kind of mapping the behaviors.
Yeah. And so those end up mapping to these four quadrants of things that you should do, right? Or you do the things that you should do. And ultimately there's two squares there that you really want to focus on doing, but we end up often doing the two squares that are what we shouldn't be doing, right? Like we end up doing the things we shouldn't do and not doing the things that we should do. And so what I want to do is I want to get us past this impulsive kind of reaction of just doing whatever's pleasurable in the moment and grow the ability to really resist, right? Can we grow the ability to resist? Can we grow the ability to take action when it's important to? Can we really grow the ability to just be more in control of ourselves? And what's up against that is kind of the joy of hedonism or just like being totally free or, being captured by some moment and just kind of not worrying about what we're doing, right? So it's a little scary to be so in control all the time, but I think many of us would be better off if we had more control over our behavior in this way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think it's super interesting to look at, right? Because so many of us struggle. I mean, even beyond drugs and eating right, do I hit snooze another couple times? Do I, run that errand that I was supposed to, or do I go home and sit on the couch? Like there's different things that we're all trying to do better. And then there's something that's so appealing about the hedonism, the instant gratification, the lack of impulse. So yeah, like definitely makes sense.
Totally. I think there's, one way that's really interesting to me, and I don't know that this is true in every sense for everything, but so often the things that feel great to do in the moment, long-term are really not that great for you. And the things that really don't feel that fantastic in the moment ultimately are really good for you long-term. And so it's almost like reversed. It's like what feels good in this moment to do, ultimately longer term is really bad. And I love these a few different dimensions to think about our life. Like with money, right? It's when you get a check you get your paycheck or whatever, it's really fun to go spend it. It's super immediately fun to go buy things you want or go to this show or do these different things. And saving our check isn't necessarily that fun. It's kind of like, well, I just made all this money. What am I doing? I'm just putting it away, right? There's nothing there. But if you just spend all the time, long term, that leads to not having a safety net, not really building your wealth, right? Not having any of that stuff going on. But if you can save your check, which isn't immediately fun, but longer term, you end up feeling really wealthy, feeling confident, feeling more secure in a lot of ways, right? And so if we can't save our money, if we end up with poor money habits, it's a really difficult way to go through life. If we think about our health, right? Eating broccoli in the moment isn't as fun as maybe having cotton candy or something, right? But if all we do is eat cotton candy all the time, ultimately we don't feel good. Our joints feel inflamed. We're sore. We end up being heavier than we want to be. We're not healthy, right? But if we keep eating broccoli and things like broccoli that aren't maybe as immediately pleasurable, we end up, lean and fit and feeling good and getting all the nutrients we need, et cetera. And so, even in our relationships, right? If we immediately go out with our friends instead of resisting or instead of doing what we should, like go to bed early because of a big day at work, that leads to problems. Or people that just, can't stay committed in a relationship because they sleep with whoever's attractive and right near them and offering themselves, right? That ends up with consequences. It's super fun in the moment, but longer term, it's not good for trust and building intimacy and all this stuff. So across money, across health, across relationships, it's in all directions. There's this mechanism where what's immediately pleasurable, if not in some type of control, if we don't, have some control, it ends up being really bad for us quite often. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to give our listeners kind of a little bit more of a framework too of how we're going to talk about it. Is that, if you just look at the money example of what you're talking about, right? It's great to go out and spend stuff and people count down to when they get their tax returns back and they do all this planning and stuff. But there's also something really awesome about saving, yes, having a security net, having good money habits, but maybe saving for a vacation, or maybe instead of going out to like a couple dinners, you save for that really special, nice restaurant. Like, we're going to show you both sides of all of it and see kind of that there's like a rewards in doing either. And also there's downfalls in doing either. We're going to show you kind of a wider spectrum of how you can think about it.
Yeah, I love that. It's like, so the point is not never gratification, right? It's not suffering forever. It's delaying gratification, or maybe realizing that there's different kinds of gratification, right? So if you decide to eat more cleanly when you do have that dessert, it may even feel better to really have it because you haven't had it for so long. But if you're just eating desserts all the time, you end up with, whatever, canker sores. And it's just, it's like, oh, you don't feel good. And it, the fifth bite of ice cream isn't as tasty as the first bite of ice cream.
Right.
But to your point also, like delaying the gratification of a vacation, right? Not spending it immediately, but saving up so you can smartly go on some really extravagant, amazing vacation. Ultimately, there's going to be gratification there, but do you have the muscle to delay that and do it in a way that's really, really valuable?
And do you have the awareness to know when you should be delaying something and when you should be indulging?
Yeah. Like, are you even aware of how much you're doing this instant gratification thing? And I think a fast one that we come back to is just that kind of scrolling on social media or something that so many of us are doing, and there's nothing really there. There's nothing for it, but there's like a peptide addiction. Like your brain's firing like, am I important? Did I learn something? Is something funny? What am I, I'm looking to just be immediately gratified instead of, going and writing your book or, doing a bigger project that your time and attention could go for that would have a bigger payoff, be much more valuable to you, but takes that effort in the beginning. One thing I want to get to for sure is like why this is becoming even more difficult. And this is something we'll probably keep talking about, but, the technology, what I'm just talking about, everything is becoming really instant and at our fingertips, right?
Come to expect that. There's an annoyance when my Amazon Prime isn't, 24 hours. I have to wait 2 days. I'm like, what is that? Like it becomes an expectation for the society that we live in that things happen like that.
That is so funny that you just mentioned that. So I'm in a new location and I'm getting packages now, and things used to come almost all the time, like by the next day. And the last 2 things I ordered have been 2 days. And I did kind of pause. I'm like, 2 days? Like, really? Like, come on, Amazon. You know what I mean? And it's ridiculous.
Right. It totally is.
Such an incredible improvement over, any time in history ever. It's just crazy. So, but communication, right? That instant, almost the expectation of like employees being available all the time, anytime, like Saturday, Sunday. Hey, I just wrote you. Why didn't you write me back? What's going on here? Right. Instead of waiting for the album release, it's instant on stream, right? To get new music or some movie or whatever. Food, so many options, so little work, so much high caloric options that are empty in real value of nutrients to us. Grocery delivery, not even going to the grocery store anymore to have to hunt that way, right? You actually, you just kind of click and point and click and order online. Food delivery apps, Grubhub, Uber Eats, all that stuff.
My friend yesterday goes, I just got a notice from our delivery service that our groceries have been shopped for and they're now in a temperature controlled room until they can be delivered. And she's like, I feel like sometimes I'm living in the future. But I mean, really, that has become the baseline for society. And not that long ago, even I think people were like text messaging. Why can't I call you and leave a message? And when it's good for you, you can call me back. It's like, no, I texted you. Where's my text back? Like you expect that you have everyone right at your fingertips all the time, which is great, right? If there's an emergency, if there's some information you need to pass quickly, but there's something like the death of the snail mail pen pal letter, right? You're like,
totally.
When you get that, you're so excited. Now you're just like, oh, another message. It becomes more of a burden if it's too much, and then less of a reward if it's something you have to really wait for and value when it does happen.
Totally. Yeah. And so culturally, right, what's the messaging that we're getting from everywhere, right? From all the marketers, from everybody, it's more, better, faster, more pleasurable, more hedonistic, all that stuff. And, there are messages like minimalism. There are messages like go slow. There are yoga retreats and things like that. But often those even get sexied up to be like, super immediate, pleasurable, etc. And this is happening around substances, material goods, buying houses, eating, exercising, like everything. We're fed this instant, fast, easy, magical versus what's maybe healthy and right and what actually leads to like a deeper sense of satisfaction. And so what does this look like when it's out of control in somebody's life? One, you may not be even aware that this is kind of one of the mechanisms that's going on for you. This in the immediate seems like the solution, right? If I can just feel better now, that's actually what I'm looking for. And so it can become this vicious cycle of, going back to Netflix to just watch something else rather than dealing with a deeper emotional hurt, or eating ice cream, right? To emotionally eat or whatever, or doing drugs, or, going to the bar again to feel better in the moment. When the deeper work that's actually more satisfying actually leads to growth and happiness and, self-love and pride and all these things, is a different mechanism, right? So, but what this looks like when it's out of control is we end up really dissatisfied with ourselves. We probably have a pretty skewed perception of how the world works, right? This expect muscle, which the world is working that way more and more and more. But when we talk about how the world works, how the world really works to feel satisfaction and happiness and deeper fulfillment more sincerely, right? And so we end up with an inability to flex the gratitude muscle or to be really happy with what is and present. And we end up missing the present because we're constantly looking for more different. How do I get something I don't have? And so it actually ingrains this deep sense of lack in what I am because I need these external things, which is really kind of the definition of addiction, right? Like addiction is I need something outside myself to feel better than I do, right? And because my current state is pain or dissatisfaction or itch or craving. And because of that, I need something outside myself. So this instant gratification muscle really tracks with, feeling addicted in certain ways to certain things, right?
And then another element, which I don't want to sidetrack us, but what I thought of is, what's sustainable, right? So if you're doing something to fill the void or to meet some kind of whatever, right? You could do quick hits every day, but like what's sustainable? Is it sustainable to do that? Is it sustainable for our world to be in this fast pace let's buy more, let's consume more, let's have everything instantly? Like when is that? And I know that's kind of more my own opinion and kind of theorizing, but when is that going to implode on itself?
No, it's so funny.
Personally, or like the world in general?
Well, I just jotted that down because we have to do a whole nother talk on sustainability because it really, and a lot of these things end up touching, right? I mean, probably all of these things end up touching in the grand conversation of what, how do we make life better and all that stuff. But sustainability in the long term is really probably the goal of it's really what we should be thinking about in all these ways. And sustainability has a lot to do with like balance, right? Like being way out of balance is what becomes unsustainable. And so, in the idea of balance at a micro level or a level of self, there's problems with only delaying gratification also, right? At some point, we actually have to have the gratification, right? So, imagine somebody who's so uptight, so good at delaying gratification, never spends, never enjoys, never has the cake, never has anything. We can really never live in the moment, right? We're never actually present to experience the joy or whatever because we're constantly delaying gratification. And when that's happening, somebody's in too much control, right? Like somebody who's suffering from like almost an OCD or like a control disorder and being ultimately too rigid with themselves. I mean, one thing that comes to mind is a way to think about this. And I'm not saying that this is exactly psychologically correct, but I think it's a useful analogy, right? Is to think about somebody with anorexia, right? Somebody who's never allowing themselves to enjoy food because they're trying to have the gratification of a different or better body, right? Now there's psychological things where they're not even seeing themselves appropriately. But that anorexia is this constant delaying of gratification, right? Never really allowing yourself to eat. And it can literally lead to death. Like it can lead to serious health issues and real death. And if you've ever been around somebody who's got really bad anorexia, I mean, they're decaying in front of you. They smell bad. Like there's, it's a really sad thing to see. And so in its worst, it's not just delayed gratification. That's not it. But I think for the majority of the human population, the bigger challenge to the average human being is kind of wrestling the instant gratification off, right? And getting to a place that's sustainable personally for them to, really find proper gratification, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think kind of landing on the idea, and I think it's just, and I guess I'm being personal on this podcast, Rob.
Yeah.
But another personal share is what I think that Rob does really well as a coach, and what we do really well in the business is we are looking at your ability to get gratification, right? We're recognizing that there's multiple avenues to get there, and we're just trying to help talk about kind of both sides of it. And often we think, okay, instant gratification is bad, delayed gratification is good, but like gratification is it's a thing that we're all trying to get to, and there's different ways to get there, and there's just different times. So I love that kind of analogy of, hey, delayed gratification can be equally as harmful as living in only instant gratification.
Yeah, I mean, they both can kill you if you get them wrong all the way, right?
Right.
And thank you for that, because I think that what we're trying to do is not live a life that's like a monk and is suffering all the time and none of that makes sense. We're trying to live a life that is the most satisfying, the most fulfilling, the most sincere and deep and whatever. And what I find in clients often is that their strategies, their mental models for what's going to lead to success or happiness or gratification are misaligned, right? And they have bad stories inside that are setting them up for behaviors that aren't serving them. And it takes outside counsel to, kind of show you that, wow, okay, I had that totally lined up wrong. I thought that I was going to find all my satisfaction in a perfect partner that I would find one day, or I thought it was going to be in the rock hard abs that I would get, or I thought it was going to be the $1 million business I would build. And what we find is that it's a little more complicated than that. And if we think it's only that, right? So I think what you're trying to say there is it's not only delaying gratification. That's not the only game here, but it's doing all of this kind of properly in a way that's balanced and deeply makes sense. So let's get into a couple of tips, right? Like what's useful? What can we do about this? If we talk about primarily the person who's suffering from instant gratification overload, right? Like just doing kind of in those two boxes where you're not doing the things you should do and you are doing the things you shouldn't do, right? If that's you a little bit too much, the good news is that there's actually a portion of your brain that can strengthen if we practice it, right? This is not something that just is simply genetic or you're simply left with this, right? There are ways to grow the ability to delay gratification more and more easily. And one quick tip on that, something that we have a free program about, people can go check out, backtobreath.com, is that mindfulness or meditation is a fantastic way to flex this muscle. Right. And why that is, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on meditation here in this episode necessarily, but what you're doing when you're trying to be mindful is you're trying to place your attention on something like your breath. And what happens is thoughts come up. Your brain is built to generate thoughts. And as they come up, you're gaining the ability to not follow them, right? What's instantly gratifying is, and easier and kind of default, is to just follow the thought, right? Like, I had a thought, let me move my attention there and just kind of stay with it. And what we're building up in meditation is the ability to not do what's instantly gratifying and instead bring our attention back to breath, right? Bring our attention back to something that matters. So every time you do that, it's like a rep for your brain, and actually different parts of your brain light up that actually support this ability through the rest of your life to say no to the dessert or to say no to the instant spending or to whatever, right? So we're literally growing. Somebody who's has a deep meditation practice is way better in their life at not doing the instantly gratifying thing across their life because they're practicing with their thoughts, right? For 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day or whatever. So this deeply helps us with impulse control, right? If you in your life feel like you want impulse control, one little move is learning, to work with your mind a little bit, work with the impulse of your thinking, and you can do that through mindfulness. So is that a confusing tip or is that a helpful tip, Sarah?
No, I think it's helpful, and I think I want to circle back because, looking at both sides of good and bad, and not really naming either as good or bad, but really kind of maybe the culprit here, and the people listening are saying, hey, this is where I'm struggling, is really impulse control.
Yeah.
Right. Like that seems to be the closest thing I can put my finger on and say, hey, if you don't have that, you're kind of in trouble, whether you're looking at it, and that's going to lead to you falling into instant gratification more than delayed, but being separate from, which of those are good or bad. It's like, can you do things in your life that would help you gain more impulse control, gain a better no muscle, find more gratitude and more presence, and then ultimately be able to control how you're receiving gratification.
Totally.
So I definitely think that's useful.
Yeah, I love the idea of impulse control is just kind of a different way to say this, right? If you are gaining control of what you do and what you don't do, right, you're going to have to be able to manage your own impulses, because attractive things that are bad for you pop up all the time, right? Not useful, attractive things to do pop up all the time, right? These opportunities are just happening around us all the time. So how do we manage that impulse to just follow what's seems obvious or fun or satisfying in the moment? How do we kind of move our attention and stay in tune with what we value and what matters to us longer term, right? How do we do that? And if we don't have impulse control, we know we want to do our taxes, but every time there's a different TV show on, it's like, well, not now, not now, not now. And then we end up right at tax time, like frenzied. We don't do the real work that we want to do. We don't find the real receipts we're supposed to find, and we do our taxes more poorly. We maybe lose money. We gain stress. It's all this bad stuff, right? So,
well, in one way, I think that I'm kind of uncovering it as we're talking about it, that's meaningful to me, is when I think about ways to improve my impulse control abilities. I think of the doing side. And what I'm kind of hearing now and kind of want to think about more is that it really happens in your head, in your mind, in the way your thoughts are. Mm-hmm. So that is not always the first place I go to kind of strengthen habits or to practice no or whatever. But I think that's a great tip, is that like you can start doing that without actually doing anything, right? You're changing the way that your thought creation is happening, and really just your thought focus is happening, which is, it's way easier than I think how I was trying to tackle it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the perfect workout plan or the perfect cooking plan, right, whatever. Right. You can begin to strengthen this universally by getting better at managing your own attention and your own impulse control, for sure. So let's mention this also. Here's another tip, and then I'm going to give you more ideas on what to do about this in a second. But I want to point out that any search for gratification of any kind, whether it's instant or delayed, is taking us out of the present moment, right? So there is this other domain of being in the moment and really being with where the beauty really is, which is where you are in this moment, having a gratitude muscle that you can turn up, and realizing that there's always beauty where you are, right? There's always a feeling of happiness that's available to you if you can manage how you're doing your meaning making in the moment. And so what this whole talk kind of defaults to is that we're in this constant search for gratification, whether that should be right now in something that I can do or consume or whatever, or in the future, right? But that's putting us on an assumptive platform of the gratification is crucial, right? That I'm supposed to be gratified all the time. And the reality is that there's a whole other dimension of, can you be present, happy, contented exactly where you are, so that you're not even doing the immediate thing and you're not doing any planning about the future. You're actually just present. So again, knowing how to turn that muscle on is really, really important, and is almost like a shortcut out of this whole conversation, right? I didn't want to miss talking about the dimension that is being happy exactly where you are, being actually falling into the gratification that you have right now, no matter what, right? That isn't time-based at all. Does that make sense?
I mean, that's the hugest takeaway, I think, here, because that is also a shortcut to feeling less overwhelmed, to feeling less anxious, to feeling happier, to feeling, less stressed. And often I think when we get into any of those states, anxiety, stress, overwhelm, depression, that's when we're really lacking impulse control. So very, very, very good place to land. And also very kind of, it's hard to talk about just that without kind of looking at all the sides of it. So,
yeah. So, some more important tips on what to do with this. Awareness is almost always the first step. So just hearing this information hopefully is really valuable, and having people go, wow, okay, are there things I should be delaying gratification on? Am I searching for too much instant gratification? Is that costing me anything? Do I have access to being gratified even right in this moment without doing anything, right? Do I have that muscle? But let's say that we're doing that move from instant gratification to delayed gratification. It's really important that we can pick the things that you want to stop, right? What is the change that you want? What are the things that you're doing that you need to stop doing? And what are the crucial things that you need to start doing? And don't make this list too long, right? Do you want to eat a little bit better and not just impulse, candy corn constantly or whatever you might be doing, right? Is that important? Is that a game changer for you if you could do delayed gratification around food? Is a savings plan there? And I'm not saying you have to save your entire check every time you get a check, but could you save 10% of what you're doing, right? And just go, I'm not going to blow it all right now. I'm going to build a savings habit and do that delayed gratification with a portion of what I make, right? So think about the things you want to stop. Are there any addictions or things that you're doing that you need to stop? What are the things that you want to start doing, right? Because there's the do and don't do muscle here in impulse control and all that. And then ultimately start working with knowing where your attention is going, right? Being in control of your own mind and attention is one of the most powerful things that actually give us agency in this world over being like a puppet to other people's desires, marketing impulses, all these different things. If you can't be self-aware of where your attention is and what's going on, and then have the courage to change it in any moment, then you're going to really, really be suffering. So do you know what your motivation is? Do you know what matters? Do you know what's important, what you want to stop and what you want to start? And then can you begin to do that game of saying, okay, I'm not going to do this. One of the tips on the things that you do want to do them first. And here's why. Because with this and willpower, I don't think it matters as much as some people say it does. I think some people think that willpower is the entire game. One of the things that we do in our work with clients is we really realign thinking, thought creation, what's happening subconsciously, et cetera. That is actually, in my opinion, way more powerful than just willpower, because willpower will often let you down in a lot of ways. But I don't want to say that willpower isn't useful at all. And it probably begs a whole nother talk on willpower, but there are muscles there that we can start to gain traction with if we can do things earlier. Like you will tend to have more willpower in the morning than you will at night, right? You'll wake up with the most willpower that you're going to have for the day. So if there are important things to do, like working out or eating right or whatever, doing them first is something you'll often hear me say, like do them as early and as soon as you can. If you want to build a meditation habit, often it's really helpful to just wake up and sit for a few minutes so that you get check mark the day, right? That I worked with my mind today. Because if by the end of the day, you're going to want to flop in front of TV or just rest or do whatever, because the day has beaten you up and has taken your willpower. You end up with decision fatigue and you're getting beat up there.
I mean, would you say also then, as willpower depletes, does impulse control deplete in the same way?
100%. Yeah, there's absolutely a correlation there, because it is an act of will to move your attention around. It is an act of will to control that impulse. So for sure. Now, the difference here that is what we do in our work with people is there's a way to pattern in other ways of being, right? If you are having impulses that are popping up unconsciously that are really unhealthy for you, there are ways to repattern the mind so that those impulses don't show up in the same way. And that can be often way more powerful because that's not as dependent on willpower. But what people are probably really aware of already is their own ability to apply their will. And just a short little really powerful tip is see if you want to start eating better or add vitamins to your life or whatever that might be, do that in the morning. Like wake up, do it first, right?
Have a healthy breakfast.
do a green smoothie, something like get in the vitamins first. And then at least you did that, right? Because if you don't and you're waiting for later, it may not happen at all.
Right.
So what happens if you apply this? What happens if you apply, some tactics to begin to have more impulse control, to do a little bit more delayed gratification? I think if you can grow that, you're going to grow to be the kind of person who has more self-control, who is less vulnerable to just being swayed around and moved by other people's influences. You'll have more agency to be who you want to be in the world. You'll be able to do your important habits more. You'll have the ability to set and accomplish important goals. You'll hopefully grow that ability to appreciate the present more. You'll have less anxiety, better problem-solving skills, all these things, right?
And you will probably, in whatever way, emotionally, mentally, or physically, you will be more sustainable.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
You're going to be, instead of, highs and lows, you're going to feel more here. You're going to feel more steady. You're going to feel more trustful, dependable. You're fulfilled, happy, or whatever, all those things that people are looking to be and think that they can get it from the highs and lows. But you'll find as you strengthen that muscle, as you grow in your awareness, that things will feel more steady. And I think in general, in the chaotic world that we live in, a lot of people are looking to just feel, steady.
Better. Yeah, well, better
and steady.
Be more in control. Well, let's think about it. What happens if you can't manage this? I mean, I know we've talked about this a lot already, but I want to be really clear with this. If you can't manage this, if you have no impulse control, that does lead toward addiction of food or drugs or media. It does lead to a never satisfied mindset, right? Except when you're consuming. But even when you're doing that, it's not satisfying in the same way often, right? We end up feeling selfish and entitled. We end up in a false, not sustainable reality. We end up impatient, depressed, anxious, stressed, overwhelmed, full of decision fatigue. And it's some self-loathing, right?
Yeah, if we're setting goals like, I really want to go on that vacation. I really want to, put money in my retirement. I really want to lose a couple pounds. And then we keep hitting the instant and don't wait for the delayed. I think ultimately that can lead to also depression and self-loathing.
100%. Yeah. So, something, and we'll start winding down this talk. I want to, to change in total, you need to change your thinking, you need to change how you feel, and you need to change your behaviors in life, right? If you're not changing all of those, it's not going to necessarily be as complete a change as it can be. One of the reasons that we started this podcast is I want to be able to just give away different ways to think about things, different things to become aware of, right? Because if we're not aware of it and then things are happening unconsciously, we can't really attack or change if we don't even know what the thing is. So thoughts themselves can be a huge game changer. And that's why we're doing this podcast. We want to bring different ideas into your awareness. If we're not aware, we can't make the changes, right? But if you want to go further, sometimes just knowing about something isn't enough, right? Because we can know it, but then not do it, not kind of embody it, if that makes sense.
Or not see it, like you said. Sometimes you need somebody else to kind of say, hey, you're not quite aligned with where you want to go. Yeah. I can help. I can help correct your course.
Your strategies aren't there. And so when that requires help, where do we go, right? We go to coaches. Maybe it's therapy. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's doing deeper work. Maybe it's going through a program that's been set up to help with a certain thing, right? So, today's thought was about this dynamic between instant gratification, delayed gratification, thinking about impulse control, also thinking about that ability to be gratified right where you are, right? I really want people to be able to get that. We've given you a few tools for that. But if you want to go deeper, there are ways to literally recode your mind, right? I think that a lot of people need to understand that our thought creation, what's happening consciously and what's happening unconsciously, ends up in patterns that don't serve us, that make us think that instant gratification is the best way to go. And so, one of our programs called Recode Your Mind is a phenomenal next step if you know that you've got impulse control issues, if you're not sure what matters to you, if you want to actually change how you think about money, health, relationships, and self, right? If you have negative thoughts or persistent limiting beliefs or anything, that program is just fantastic. As I've mentioned before, we've got Back to Breath as a free mindfulness challenge. It's a 7-day, really simple thing that's super valuable. You can go check that out at backtobreath.com. You can check out Recode Your Mind at recodeyourmind.com. And I think that's good for now. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for staying with us and listening, and we really appreciate it. You can also find us on iTunes and YouTube, and many Spotify, SoundCloud. So.
If you could rate and review and help, if this has been valuable to you, go ahead and do that for us. Otherwise, we hope this has been really helpful. Have an amazing day. We'll talk to you really soon.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.